Welcome to the 98% podcast where we hear real stories from real people. And today's a special episode where we're going to go through the 20 episodes. We're celebrating 20 episodes, which this is way overdue, by the way. I think we're on 27, so I'll have a 30 episode one here pretty quick. But, things have been a little hectic, so just getting around to it. So what I'm going to do is I did the 10 episode recap prior, so feel free to watch that if you'd like to. And what I do is, with each episode, the guests that come on, they create a question for the person that proceeds in, right, that goes after. So what I want to do is I'm going to kind of go through and answer those questions. So everything from episode 11 to 20 are those questions I'm going to answer, just so, as you learn about these guests, you connect, you can also learn from me here, sharing my stories as well. So, and as we go through it, so thing I did last time is I didn't really recap the episodes, but I want to recap just a brief recap of each one and kind of who shared the questions. So looking forward to that. So it is Christmas time. So by the time this releases, it's after Christmas, but still got my Christmas decor up. But here we go. Let's get into it. So question number one. So this was from episode 11. So this was Brittany, and her question was favorite color. So and to recap this episode, so what I really liked about her episode is she went through, so a lot of the stuff she shared, she was very much, she went through a lot of stuff. So she went through a lot of health issues, health crisis, etc. And it kind of all happened spur of the moment, just out of the blue, out of nowhere, right? So healthy all through high school, and then all of a sudden, just health crisis, which is insane. So she spoke a lot about kind of like her struggles with that, and then how she kind of overcame them, and just the processes, the medical help she had. And I thought she did a very great job, a really good job at really speaking to the details, right? Simplifying it so we understand, but also really taking a technical approach to kind of sharing that information, which that was really good. So hopefully that helped a lot of people that are kind of going through a lot of those similar things, whether it be a health crisis, having medical issues, you could say malpractice, right? Just stuff that they should have been checking for and they didn't, which is unfortunate. But I thought that was a really great episode to kind of discuss that. So hopefully you learned a lot there. But her one was favorite color. And I thought that was funny because the episode was so deep, but the question is so not deep, right? It's kind of like a surface level question, or so I thought, right? So when I talked to her about it, I thought that was really funny. It's like, well, why'd you pick what's favorite color? And she talked about the psychology of colors, right? So when you choose a certain color, when you wear a certain color, etc., it can tell things about you, which was fascinating. So I know her and I are working on doing a little special episode where she kind of goes through the color psychology and talks about that. So if that's something you're interested in, tune in, and we'll go through color psychology with you. But favorite color. My favorite color is black. So I don't know if that surprises anybody, but it's funny because it's technically the absence of color. But what I think so interesting about it is it goes with everything. I also love it in contrast to other colors. So black on its own is fine, but like black and red, black and blue, black and green, black, like just like that contrast. I don't know what it is. I just always liked it. So I don't know. I can't remember the psychology behind black. I'd have to look that up, but we'll discuss that more in a bit. But that's always been my favorite color. So I wear a lot of black or dark colors, and I'm wearing gray, so it's not quite black. But yeah, I've always been to metal music, things like that. So who knows? Maybe that stems from that as well. But as far back as I can remember, that was always kind of like my favorite color. So that's it. So make all the assumptions you want. Okay. So next episode, so this is from episode 12. So this was Joe. So Joe's question was, what is your why? But what I liked about his episode, so he talked a lot about kind of his journey. So we talked a lot about, being a bouncer. He talked about doing basketball, struggling with knee injuries, et cetera, and having those knee surgeries. And then just now his current journey where he's really just trying to explore himself, trying to figure out himself and what he wants to do. Right, from creating his own business to really focusing on strength training, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, just all those things. And it was fun to kind of reflect too, because in our episode, we reflected a lot on our previous time at Nike. So we worked together in that space. And it's funny, he was just one of those guys that I just would overhear chatting and stuff and just seemed like a fun presence to just chat with. So we used to have conversations here and there. So, it was a no-brainer for me to ask him to come on the podcast just to share his story. So it was really good though. I really enjoyed that. So his question, so what is your why? So, and it's a vague question, right? So it's very broad. And I think we discussed that in the episode is why about what, right? So when I think of this question, I think, okay, if we were to put everything together, so why I do this podcast, why I do music, why I do training and development for a job, why I exist essentially, right? I mean, I'd say it's kind of all connected. I'd say the why for me is I want to help people in a way that is fun and exciting, something that I enjoy, and in a creative manner. So I'm a very creative person, always have been. So I tend to think outside the box on a lot of things. And I even thought about this the other day. Is like when I was in school, like I can't tell you how many times like I was in school, the teachers had us do something, and I would always ask them, "Could I do it like this, or is there something I could do?" And the funny thing is that they almost always were like, "Sure, why not?" Just because I didn't like being contained, right? I didn't like having a certain set of things you had to do. Like you had to make things this way. It's like, no, like I get it, but I want to be able to explore, to be creative, to kind of push the limits and stuff like that. So it makes something that I'm proud of. So that was a big thing for me. So yeah, so like this podcast, for instance, like I get to create, I get to have conversations, I get to help people, right, to a certain extent, like by having them share their stories with me, and hopefully that these stories help those listeners, out there for you. That really helps, and I think that that's ultimately a big tool because with the way things have been with social media, et cetera. I was actually looking at statistics the other day. We spend so much time online, way more than ever in history by far. Like that's more than with our family, more than with our friends, more than anything, and it's insane to me. So like when we think about that, it stimulates us, right? It feeds that dopamine hit, and that's fine, I guess, to a certain extent. But the problem is then we lose connection on the real world and people out there, and we get confused on kind of what's out there and trying to sift through all the information. Because that's the thing too, is like with the algorithms, I get information that maybe you don't get, and you get information that maybe I don't get, and it's all catered to what we see and what we view online. So then your perspective on something is different than mine, and it's hard to find actually what's true and what's going on. It's hard to build connection with people too, and that's the problem, is we've lost that skill. And I think that having a platform like this, because you have to go where people are, so I have to go online, I have to do this stuff, even though I don't really want to spend time online, to be real with you. You got to meet people where they are, and I think it's important that as we do that, that we can help build those connections and help people see what it's like to be human and what it's like to be in this world essentially. And I think that's the ultimate gift, because that's what's been lost. So that's why hopefully you guys get some out of it when I get the guests on here, because like I said, I want to be creative. I want to help people. I just like talking to people, like connecting to people. Always have. Like I feel like, what's the purpose if it's just supposed to be me here on my own? We're all put here to coexist, right? To be together, to share this world together, to collaborate, to connect. And I think that's what's missing a lot. So that's what I'd say. So my why is just because I want to help people in a meaningful way. I want to give people tools that maybe they didn't have, because I like to research. I like to learn stuff. Like that's just a gift of mine, that I've been able to take information, retain it, and share it. So hopefully that helps. But also at the end of the day, just connecting with people, I mean, that's kind of part of what living is, right? So yeah, I would say that's my why. That's my why. Okay, so episode 13. So this was Emmy, and her big question was, if money wasn't an object, what job would you choose? And to kind of recap her episode, what I've really always admired about Emmy is like her discipline and determination. Like I've always valued that a lot about her. Ever since we first met, we met at a Nike event, and I mean, all I heard was stories essentially, like of her before I even met her, right? The roller derby, hurting all these guys and all this stuff. It just cracked me up. But if you talk to her, she's like the sweetest gal. So it's hilarious. But she's strong, right? So, and that's something that she's always really valued, is just that strength, being able to do, powerlifting meets, high rocks, like the last thing she did, CrossFit, just all these things that she does. And the list just keeps going on and on. And I just really value that about her, that, when she wants to accomplish something, she just goes out and does it. And always really admired that. So, so her question, if money wasn't an object, what job would you choose? And money wasn't an object, I'd say I'm probably doing what I would like to do. So, like I said, I like training. That's my position now, is I'm in charge of learning and development for a company. And, that's something I really enjoy doing, because it's using my creative skills of creating content, etc., learning platforms, whatever, and teaching people. And it's just, training, it's like a performance, and I love that part of it. The only other things I'd say is, like, this podcast. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to do it. So it'd be nice to be able to do this more full time. That would be cool. And also musician. I love musician stuff. So being able to write music, perform would be nice. So I'd say, it's funny, all three of those. That's what I do now. So I'd have to find time, but I'd love to pursue all those. So I'm like I said, I'm pursuing what I want to do right now. And I can't foresee anything else that I'd rather do, but you never know. Things always kind of pop up. Okay. So episode 14. So this was Seth. So his question was, if everything were to end in a week, what would you do? And Seth, so his episode was great. So so before that episode, I hadn't seen him in like a decade, which is really crazy to think about. So him and I go way back. So we played in Nightmare Nevermore together. So we played in the band stuff, and he was like the latest addition to the group. So it started off with me and John playing guitar back in the day, and then after playing for a bit, we talked to Tony, the drummer. So he was on board. So what we did is we switched John to bass, so we could be a three-piece. So we played all the songs. I sung and played guitar, he did bass and drums, and then we performed that way. And then Seth, because I always wrote two guitar parts for almost every song, he was kind of the latest addition. We worked with him at Outback, and we talked a little bit. We didn't chat a bunch, but yeah, we just kind of connected like right away. And he's been awesome. He's an awesome musician, awesome guitar player, and he's just the best dude, like the funnest guy to talk to, etc. And it was funny to not see him in a decade show up on that podcast episode and just connect. I mean, we talked for, it was almost 4 hours, which was insane. Like almost 4 hours worth of us just chatting and reminiscing about the old times and just connecting. Like, not that did we not only not skip a beat, but I feel like we connected better than we ever have on that podcast episode. And whether we talk about music, or whether we're talking about solar because he does solar installation, or whether it be talking about just psychology, just things like that. And it was a great conversation. So to answer this question, if everything were to end in a week, what would you do? If everything were to end in a week, I would probably I would find some friends. I'd probably go to some, I'd probably get all my friends together that I could think of, friends and family, whoever I want to, take a trip out somewhere where we've never experienced, just enjoy nature, hiking, enjoying the moment, just honestly, just kind of doing whatever we want to do and just having a good time. Specifically where I would go, I don't know, but if I had a week to find out, I'd make a list pretty quick, and I'd be on the phone trying to see who I could connect with. But that would be what I do. Okay. Let's see. So this was Joe. So this is other Joe Batchelor. So episode 15. So his one was go anywhere, and if you could go anywhere in time, where would you go? And Joe, to recap his episode was awesome. So very deep episode. So how I knew him is we went to school together. I mean, I remember us hanging out in junior high. He was my locker partner in junior high. He also just hung out with, me, Tony, Josh, all these other people. We just, we're all friends. We just hung out together. But he lost his father in high school, and I just remember I just remember him struggling, right? And because we had gym class together and stuff, and I just didn't really know what happened to a certain extent. Like he was there one minute and then he wasn't there, and and I hadn't talked to him since. So to have him reach out, because he actually reached out after I think it was episode one, just doing my introduction, and he said he had a good story to share, and I said, yeah, let's do it, and just to reconnect with him and just hear his story about what he went through when he went to Midwest Academy and just all the stuff, man, just like the torturous stuff essentially that they did, thinking they're doing everything for a noble cause and that they're doing the right thing, when ultimately it's traumatizing kids, it's hurting kids, and it's causing all these issues, and it's frustrating. I just remember him sharing his story for the first time and me just doing everything I could to just stay calm and keep it together, because man, I was frustrated, right? Like it sucks when you hear about things that happen to kids especially, and that they have no control, right? They're kids, right? They have to do what they're told. If they don't do what they're told, especially in a situation like that, they get put in isolation, they get punished, they get all the stuff that happens, and it was awful to hear. But it was such a good episode. I know it was really great for him to share. I know he told me that, and I'm just really glad we had him on the episode and we're able to talk through that, because it was. I still have people reach out and say that they love that episode because of how intimate it was and how deep that was. Because people go through that stuff, but people don't know about that. So to have that come to light and see the stuff that happens, I think brings an awareness to some things that maybe wasn't there before. So yes, that was an awesome episode. So his question was, if you could go anywhere in time, where would you go? Anywhere in time. I don't know. See, that's a weird thing to me. So I'm not a huge history buff. Not really. I mean, what's weird though is like, if you give me lore or history on like some sci-fi thing, like whether it be a board game or whatever, like I'll get into that. I don't know what it is, like learn about the history, the culture, like all this stuff. Like that's fascinating to me. I don't know if that's the creativeness in me or what, but when it comes to like actual history, I don't get into it too much, and I think it's because I don't know how much of it is true. And I know some people say like, the thing they love about history is that it's facts. That's what people say all the time, but it's not. It's factual things that happen, but it's from a perspective of what they say, the perspective of the winner. Essentially, it's from the perspective of someone that won. So a lot of the stuff gets convoluted as far as this is good, this is bad, and we don't get into the complexities of what even happened. And I don't even know how much stuff is real or blown out of proportion. How much it's hard. It's hard to gauge because, I mean, you as well as I know, there's stories of people that that aren't real anymore, right? Like I think about, I think of, no shame towards any actors like Bruce Lee or people like that, but like if you think about their stories, there's a lot of like legend that's getting put into that. And they did great things. He did awesome things and was definitely like someone special for that time. But like if you hear some of the stories people say, like they're totally false. A lot of them are. And it's just crazy to think like if that's the case, and that hasn't been that long of a span, imagine how much has been shifted through time through talking about history. So that being the case, you didn't need all those details, I guess, but I like to get you in my brain so you kind of understand what's going on. But I would say I would probably want to go the opposite. I'd say anywhere in time, I would probably want to visit the future just to see what it's like for fun. So I wouldn't do the past. I'm not a past dweller, even though it might be cool to go see, Rome and stuff like that, because the architecture stuff would be pretty sick. That would be fun to see. So if I did have to go history, maybe that would be a place I would go just to see it in its full form. But future, like I just like to see what it's like in 100 years, right? Or just I don't know, just to see what it's like, just to see that like how important are some of the stuff that we're going through now, and how much does it actually affect what's going to happen in the future? Because some stuff I think we get so caught up as a society, and this could be also the social media things we hear it all the time, is that we get so caught up in I think small details, thinking that it's the end of the world essentially. And if we were to fast forward 10 years, that may not even be a topic anymore, right? So I think about that. And then also I do think about maybe some of those things that maybe we didn't think about. It's like, hey, whoa, this was a thing. And then 100 years from now, this is actually what happened. Like that's wild to think about, the transition from this to that, right? So I don't know, because who knows? Maybe 100 years in the future, maybe everyone is more connected. Maybe we've realized that like, oh, some of this stuff isn't really healthy for us, and we've course corrected, and that would be kind of fun to see. But yeah, so future. Okay, episode 16. So this was Alani. So I worked with her at Nike. Her question was, if you could choose a fictional character that you relate to, who would it be and why? And I remember her saying that she got that in an interview. She was at a job interview, and that's a question they gave her, and it threw her off, but she really loved it, so that's why she picked that question for us. But what I liked about her story is like she was a dancer, and she still is a hip hop dancer, I believe. But new mom, things like that. So it was really fun just to kind of chat with her and get a perspective, because she's also, I believe she said, a second generation. What's the word? Drawing a blank, foreigner. That's not the right word. But either way, so to hear her experience of like, what was her parents' journey like? How is she currently, like, what was some of the struggles she went through? What is dance? What is all this stuff? Because I'm not a big dance person, so that's also a new culture that I was wanting to learn about as well, just from her. So it was a good conversation. I really enjoyed that a lot. So, and she's also got a podcast. I could plug it now. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Sorry, Alani. But I know she's been doing podcasting too. And yeah, I'd love to connect with her a little bit more and see how she's doing with that. But so if I could choose a fictional character that I relate to, who would it be and why? This is a tough one because I don't really necessarily remember, but I know there's been plenty of times where I've watched a movie or something where I'm like, oh, I totally get where that guy's coming from. But just thinking real quick while I'm on this thought process, right, where I'm really in the zone. I've been told in the past, I remember in the past people said, I reminded them of Captain America. I've had people say, remind me of Iron Man. I've had different people, which is funny because those are like kind of opposites. If you watch the movies, they are kind of opposites. But I relate with multiple perspectives of both, right? But yeah, I think that's it. I don't think I've ever related with a character 100%, but I've related with parts of it. And it's funny because you can see yourself, or maybe that's the point of fiction, is you can see yourself in lots of different characters. So, I mean, let's do that example, for instance. So when I think about Iron Man, right? So he's futurist, right? So he's thinking about the future. He's very focused on technology. He's creative. He's kind of a sarcastic, kind of outgoing, fun guy, etc. And some of that stuff I relate to, right? And I think it makes sense. And his journey from being very selfish to kind of selfless at the end was, I think, a big thing. And I relate with that because I know that I always leaned selfish, I think, in the past, if I had to say anything, right? Like a little more on the selfish side. Even though I cared about people and I cared about people's perspectives, I think I did used to lean that way. And then also from the Captain America side, when I think about that, like the guy who he doesn't quite fit in, right? So like he's noble, he wants to stand for the right things, he wants to help people, he wants to stand up for people and do what's right. But yet it's in a world where he feels like he's not really part of it. And I deal with that sometimes. Like sometimes I feel, you could say alone, right? So like I feel like, example, like I talk to people all the time. They give me pop culture references. I have no idea what's going on in pop culture. I have no idea what's popular on the radio. I don't watch the news. I'm just disconnected from all that because I don't understand the value in it necessarily, right? So I kind of have my own things that I'm into, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just sometimes it can feel like I'm just different, right? It kind of feels like I'm disconnected somehow, and that's one reason why. If I was going to say there's a selfish reason for starting this podcast, that would be it, right? Is just to chat with people and realize that I'm not alone personally, because like as much as the guests are helping other people on these episodes, they're helping me too. Like when I have these conversations, like I'm learning from them and I'm realizing like, hey, we have a lot of similarities, right? We have some differences, we have some stuff, but at the end of the day, we all are human. We all want to connect. And it's very reassuring to me. And it really helps out a lot. So after that conversation, I'd say I actually lean maybe more with Captain America, I'd say in that regard. But very interesting. So yeah, so I'd say that would be mine. Okay, episode 17. So this was Mike. So his question was, what moment in your life did you realize it's time to make a change and put pedal to the ground? and Mike, so I actually worked with him at Nike too, way back in the day. We did collaborate through training. When I did training with Nike, I did travel to his store sometimes and have conversations. So we stayed connected. Um, what I loved about our podcast is, like I have a nerdy side of me. I don't say that I'm a nerd necessarily, but I also don't think I'm anything. I think I'm a little bit of everything. So, for instance, like I like some nerdy things, but I don't like a lot of nerdy things. So I don't always resonate with the nerds, but I have enough of a resonation. Like I resonate enough with certain things, but also like I think about jocks. Like I've never been a jock, never wanted to be a jock, but I've always been really athletic and good at sports. Okay, so same thing. I wouldn't say I'm that, but I do relate with some of those people. I can have conversation because I did sports. And I feel like it's like that in a lot of different areas. And I don't know if it's just because I like to move from thing to thing or I like to dabble a little bit. But yeah, so what we got to do is on that episode is we really got to dig into like the nerdy side of things, right? So me and him used to play a game in my house all the time called Heroescape, which they just released, by the way. So if anybody's up for doing a board game, some miniatures game, have some fun. There you go. It's awesome. But we used to play that all the time. He also did D&D and lots of stuff, which I still have not done D&D, which is surprising to me. But we used to connect and stuff like that. Like we were into superheroes. He was a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, so we talked about that sometimes. And we just used to connect over like I could get like my nerdy self out when I would chat with him, right? Because that was a part of me that I like to share and like to get out sometimes. So we had that. Now, yeah, during his episode, what was really cool is he talked a lot about some of the struggles he went through as well. So, from only having an eighth grade education, doing a lot of series of jobs. Now he's coaching people or he's managing people at a store. Like there's lots of things like it's cool to see that like the work that he put in, even though he necessarily didn't have the UK qualifications, by putting in the hard work and persevering and honestly just being a good dude. Like he's smart. He's also good with people. Like just he cares about people, and you can tell like he's moved up and been successful in that matter, without any of those credentials. And I think that's always really, really special to hear because you don't always need credentials in order to be successful. You can play. We all get dealt different hands. We all get different cards that were dealt. The thing is how are you going to play it? That's the important part. You can't control how you were born. You can't control where you're born. You can't control who your parents are. You can't control sometimes the environment you're in, right? When we become adults, you can shift that a little bit more. You're able to move. You're able to do things, whatever. But like once you get old enough, you can start taking that into account. And maybe you'll never be able to do certain things just because that's not the cards you've dealt. But you got to play it the best you can. And when you can do that, you can have a life that you're excited about, that's worth living, right? And I think that's a huge thing. I think his story really talked a lot about that. I really appreciated it. So with his question, go back to it. So what moment in your life did you realize it's time to make a change and put pedal to the ground? So there's a few times in life, say the most one is probably my divorce. I know I've talked about that a lot, but that was the kick in the butt that I realized that, and maybe it wasn't my fault, whatever. We don't need to talk about details, but the thing is I realized that was part of my life that I could do better in, essentially. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to be really intentional about a few things. One was discipline. So I would say back in the day, I was a very naturally gifted person at most things. I was pretty smart, so I could pick up things pretty quick and easy, no big deal. I was athletic, so I could do sports, I could do this, I could stay in shape. Like everything, a lot of that stuff kind of came natural. Okay, fair. Now, so I didn't actually acquire a lot of discipline, or I didn't think so anyways. Maybe I was disciplined to some people, but I know I could do better. And I think that was the motivation I needed to just start thinking about, okay, so I'm really good at being adaptable, flexible, going with the flow. That's a good trait to have, but that can also get you in trouble sometimes. So now I know that I needed to work on not just that, but I needed to work on orderliness, right? I needed to work on structure. I needed to build that part of me. So I did. And, through discipline, whether it was creating like habits of like, I wanted to do my YouTube channel. I hadn't been doing that forever. Okay, boom, do it. And I made a commitment at that time to post 2 videos every day or 2 videos a week. That's the goal I set, a system I did, and I kept that up for a really long time. I did the same thing with music. I wanted to excel in drums. So I made it a point where I played drums 5 days a week, and I set it as a goal. And I did that. So I just created these systems that were going to be really helpful in those moments. Um, so not only that, I did the same thing with the gym. Same thing with gym, same thing with eating. Basically, I restructured my entire life essentially of how I used to live and got some structure to it. Now, like I can be disciplined now where I want to, now that I have the skills and know that I can. And I think that's the important part is I'm not as strict on certain things as I was, but that's because that's not necessarily what I want anymore, right? There's certain things that I want, and that's okay. Because you can only give to so many things. But discipline was, I think, the big kicker and the big thing that I got out of that. So it was definitely from the divorce. I learned a lot about relationships, learned a lot about all different types of things in order to honestly be someone I would date. If you think about that, right? If you come out of a relationship and you're hoping to meet someone, then you need to, if you wouldn't want to date you, then there's a problem. And that means you probably need to work on some stuff. So I really wanted to focus on kind of maximizing that. Okay, so now episode 18. So this was Justin. So his question was, if you could change one thing about the world right now, what would it be? And Justin, also another guy that I worked with at Nike. So he was a partner. So he was in loss prevention. So he would travel around just like I would travel around. I would do training and education. He would travel around and do loss prevention and stuff. But we always had a few things in common. We were always into metal music, which is unique. I don't know what it is, but like when you, being someone who's into metal music, when you find someone who's into metal music, it's a special day because it's kind of rare. And I found a few at my current job too. And it's always funny because sometimes you can tell, but sometimes you can't. And it's funny that it just comes up and you're like, oh, what? Let's talk about this real quick. So finding those similarities is pretty funny. But yeah, we talked about, the Gojira concert. We talked about jobs. So we both got laid off actually around the same time. And so we were talking about, we were both in that state of like trying to figure out on LinkedIn and try to figure out these jobs and trying to maneuver through that essentially. So now he's got a good job, I got a good job, right? So we've been able to kind of go through that journey together. So we had some good discussions on a lot of that stuff, a lot of what we thought was interesting with culture, et cetera. And we talked a little bit about metal music as well. But so his question was, if you could change one thing about the world right now, what would it be? I think there's quite a few things I'd like to change. The problem with changing something is we don't always know the ramifications of what we're changing. So some things in theory seem like a good idea, and then the minute you do that, you don't realize how many people you potentially hurt in the process. So the thing is there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs. I heard that from Thomas Sowell once. And that, if you've ever listened to him, Tom Sowell, he's great. Love that guy. But he's an economist, and he's got some great, interesting insight on a lot of things. But that was one of his sayings, and it's so true. Like everything we try to correct in the future, everything that we try to if we just get rid of this, we're always hurting someone in the process. So you always want to try to make the decision that's going to serve the most people well, essentially. So, because the first thing popped in my head was like, if we could get rid of dating apps or social media, those were things that I thought of like, I could do without that essentially. But you have to think too, is like, well, what are the pros to those things? And the pros to dating apps, honestly, is that it can cast a wider net. You meet people you wouldn't meet before. The only problem is I know that the harms of it is that it creates this grass is greener on the other side mentality. This also, it also creates like a game where people are just basing people off pictures, etc. And they're just playing this game. So nobody wants to commit anymore in relationship. They don't want to do these things because, well, what if I miss out on someone else, right? So, think about this. If you have, 100 people in your, that like you essentially on a dating app and you're with one person, it's going to be very challenging to just want to stay with that, especially when something gets rough, like, oh, well, I have 100 other people I could choose from. And I think that's a problem. So personally, I think the pros would outweigh the cons of getting rid of those, because I think we would have to do it the old style way where we actually have to talk to people. We have to connect with people. We have to have, family introduce us to people, friends. And I think that's one of the best ways. I think don't get me wrong, for anybody that met on a dating app and are still together today, I'm not saying you shouldn't have. That's great. I'd love that happened because, right, good things do come from stuff like that. However, a lot of the people I've met, a lot of the relationships that have thrived were ones where they actually somehow met in person and not necessarily through a dating app. So that's my thing. Social media is what it is. Social media is kind of like a similar thing, just it's labeled differently. But so if I could get rid of it, maybe that would be the ideal thing. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily qualified to get rid of anything. But yeah, I'd say that's the case because right now we just got to figure it out. If this is going to be how the world is, which is it is, so we can't really wish for things to be different, then we have to adapt accordingly. So, okay, so next, episode 19. So this was Tony. So his question was, what is one regret you've had and what have you learned as a result? So Tony's episode. So he's our drummer. So we played drums for a long time. He was the second person essentially in the group, and me and him actually played together before we even started that band. You know, we played in a band we talked about called Cugula Corbis in junior high. I tried to make up an elaborate name that sounded cool. I thought it sounded cool. I thought it sounded pretty metal when I was in junior high. It means absolutely nothing. So obviously we changed it. But we played at the talent show in 8th grade, and it was a fun time. But it was fun, same thing. So I hadn't seen him it wasn't as long as Seth. Seth was about a decade. Tony was probably 5-6 years maybe. I think we had breakfast once or something like that. But yeah, he has the longest episode. He has a record for the longest episode, which was 4 hours and 15 minutes, which is insane. Same thing. Like we started talking, connecting, like we never skipped a beat. If anything, we got closer. Like I learned a lot of things about Tony that I never knew. And I've been friends with him. You know, he even said, like, I'm his longest running friend. He's honestly one of my longest running friends. Like, that's someone that I've been friends with for a really long time. And I learned so many new things about him through that podcast, right? Everything from like, just like, why, some of the stuff he struggled with. I didn't know. I didn't know about his family dynamic. I guess there's a lot of things I just didn't know. So, so his question was, what is one regret you've had? Or what have you learned as a result? So, I think regrets are tricky. So the thing is I have regrets in the moment, constantly. I think I constantly actually have regrets in the moment because I'm one of those people that, I like to improve. I like to do my best. So when things don't go according to plan, that's when the regrets happen, right? Because I start thinking, well, if I would have done this better, if I could have done this, or maybe if I would have said this or done this, right? And I assume in that moment that things would be different, right? Because that's what you assume is if I just said this one thing, or I wasn't this aggressive, or we do think things would be different. The thing is there's no guarantee that it would have. So there's a good chance that actually maybe it would have ended up the same way regardless. And so that's a tricky question because, like I said, I have in-moment regrets. But if I think now about any regrets that I've had in my life, I don't think that I've had any. And the reason being is, I know it's a lot of people say, well, that's a cop-out answer. But I mean, if you think about it, holistically speaking, do I like where I am right now? Holistically, right? Are there certain parts of my life that I would change? Yeah, probably. There's certain things that I'd like. I'd like to be in a long-term relationship again. I'd like to have those things, right? But generally speaking, am I happy with where I'm at? I'm like, yeah. I've started doing music again. I got this podcast. I have a great job that I work at with people that I really enjoy. I have good friends, family. I think our family's been tighter than we've ever been. I mean, I wouldn't trade it. And I think if I was to have all these regrets that I would want to trade or change things, would things be the way they are now? You could say that they could be better. So that could be the case. It's like, well, maybe I should have maintained a stronger bond with my family, right? Because there was a time where maybe if there was a few years where I didn't connect with them as much as I could have, and maybe that would have been a ultimate good, right? Like maybe that's one thing that wouldn't have a bad outcome is if I would have stayed connected earlier, maybe I'd have an even better relationship now. So, you could say regrets like that, but holistically speaking, I just don't think I would change anything right now because I would be different than who I am and potentially worse off, maybe better off. Who knows? We have no idea. We could actually, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the decisions we make doesn't ultimately matter and we would have ended up here regardless, which is crazy to think because they can go back. And this is what I always think is fascinating because if you go far enough back, there's always a small decision that changes the entire trajectory of your life. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. Good example of like the job I work now. Company I would have never thought in a million years I would work for. Never. Construction industry company, and I'm in their learning development. So teaching them leadership skills, onboarding, etc. Like that's what I do. And it's funny because it's total opposite of what Nike is, or you'd think from the surface, right? And I just think like if I didn't hop on LinkedIn in that one moment, that day, happen to scroll and see that job, read the description, because I almost didn't read the description. So read the description and be like, oh, it aligns. Should I? Let's fill out the app. If I didn't fill out the application, I would not be in this position now. It's really weird to think about, right? But what if I was always destined to be in this position? What if it wasn't that moment, would it have been another moment? It's interesting to think about. I don't know. And that's kind of the fascinating things about life is we don't know. We can speculate all we want and say like, if I change this, this would be the trajectory. This is where I would be. And maybe that is true, but ultimately, who's to say that is true? Who knows? We might end up exactly where we are supposed to be, regardless. Maybe at different times, but maybe we're always destined to be in the space we're in. I don't know. Something to think about. So to that point, regrets are interesting concept. I have a few things, and I mentioned them that I would change if it mattered. But holistically speaking, I don't know if I would change anything. Okay, so last question. So this was the 20th episode, and this was John. So and his question was, if you could be any animal, what would it be? So we're going to kind of end on lighter terms. But John, to recap his episode, so John's a bass player for us. So when we played, we originally played guitar, and this was back in high school. Me and him played a lot. Me and him played a lot, and we would just play songs that, I would write songs, he would write things, we just play back and forth, and dude, it became like a weekly thing where it's like almost every weekend, he was coming over, and we would just be practicing, playing all the time. And he's a great dude. It's been fun to kind of just chat with him and all that, but he switched to bass, and we performed quite a bit. But it's funny. I always like John because he's got this funny dynamics. His stage presence is like kind of wild and out there. But like if you talk to him, he's kind of a quiet, reserved person, which is funny. But I know we talked a lot about just like the band times playing together. He talked a lot about his faith and Christianity and things like that, and his family, and we just had a good conversation, all that. So it was fun I don't think there's anything I didn't really know for the most part. I think me and him have chatted a lot in the past. So, so it wasn't anything that I was like, whoa, like really? But it was a really great episode. So, okay. So back to this question, if you could be any animal, what would it be? I would say some type of flying creature. So maybe a bald eagle or some type of bird of prey that's just supreme, that has no predators, but just flies around, enjoys flying, exploring, being free, and stuff. I'd say that would be, I guess, where I would lean. If I went from a ferocious aspect, maybe a shark. But I don't really prefer swimming that much. So I'd say flying would be much more enjoyable to me. So so I'd say that would be it. Some of those. So cool. So that was the list. That was all 11 through 20 episodes. And I kind of like this format. Put in the comments. Let me know in the comments what stuff you resonated with. Feel free to drop your answers in the comments to any of these questions. I would love to hear your answers. And so we're on. So we took a break for holiday time, and now we're going to get back into interviews or back into podcast guests. So when we start doing that, you can expect them coming out, but I think we're on episode, 27 is next. So, I'll do a 30 episode 30 recap. So that's only 3 episodes away. And then, I think I might, since we're getting close to ending 2024, I'll probably just do a one-off where we talk, 2024, like maybe some of my biggest realizations from this year, things I've learned, and so forth. So thank y'all for tuning in. Hopefully this has been great. And yeah, I guess I'll just catch you all in the next video. Okay. Thank you all.